Erika talks K-dramas, C-dramas, T-dramas, HK-dramas. Erika talks K-dramas, J-dramas, Turkish dramas, Thai dramas. Erika talks Egyptian dramas, Indian dramas, telenovelas, but mostly K-dramas. Hello, everyone. I really need a more exciting introduction. I've been playing around with ideas in my head. When I come home from being out, I always greet my cats with, "Hola, my little chiquititos, ¿cómo están ustedes?" And I don't know why. It just seems natural to speak to cats in Spanish. Anyway, so today we're going to be taking on a big project, and I might actually have to break it into 2 episodes depending on how much I talk. I want to talk about Squid Game, and I also want to talk about 2 movies that star 2 of the members of the cast. One of the films is Finding Mr. Destiny, starring Gong Yoo, and that was released in 2010. And the other one is Over the Rainbow, starring Lee Jung-jae from 2002. I don't remember if I said that or not. So, see, I have a lot to talk about. I have info about reactions from people I know who watch Squid Game, which I don't have for most of the K-dramas or even the Korean movies, because most of them, it's very hard getting anybody else to watch them that I know. So, I hope you enjoy it, and we should get started. Squid Game, or Ojingo Game, was released in the fall of 2021. It has 9 episodes of varying lengths. The shortest episode is episode 8, which is only 33 minutes long. Most of the other episodes are almost an hour or a little over an hour long. It was written and directed by Hwang Dong-hyuk. There are a couple more seasons planned. The next season is probably going to air at the end of 2023 or maybe even the beginning of 2024. It is extremely watchable. The first time I watched it, it took me 2 days, I believe, and that was only because I was watching with my father. I would have binged the entire thing in one night if I could have. The second time I took it a little bit slower. I was discussing it with a coworker who had decided to watch it. You know, I was also taking notes for this episode, and again, supremely watchable, very bingeable, and I love shows like this. I've seen Battle Royale, the Japanese movie. I think I might have seen Battle Royale too. I'm not really sure. I've seen the Korean version of Liar Game, which I loved, and I really wish there had been a second season of that, and it never happened. I've also watched Alice in Borderland, which is another Japanese series. So when I heard about this show coming out, I was very excited. It was a lot of fun. But it is extremely violent, and apparently I am quite jaded to that because of all these Korean things I've been watching. So it did not strike me just how violent it was. My father said that he liked the series, but when I talked about with him, I think a couple months later, he said that he had probably lied, and he definitely remembered how violent it was. In the first episode, they have 456 contestants, and they lose about half of them. So just be warned if you're not used to this sort of program. The premise is it's kind of centered around children's games. A couple of my coworkers refused to watch the show, but they joked once that it shouldn't be called Squid Game because there's not a squid in the show. You know, how could they call it that? Blah, blah, blah. Well, when I rewatched it, I confirmed. I wasn't sure, but I confirmed it on the second watch. So it starts off with a bunch of kids playing Squid Game. That's the translated title of this kids' game. You have an outline of a squid on the ground. There's this whole jumping and attacking thing. And so that's the Squid Game. You get it described at the beginning of the show. And then the last game that the contestants play in the show is Squid Game. Anyway, it's kind of cool because you get to see all these children's games that are from Korea, and they're very different from the games that we played over here in the US. You start off with this man who's kind of scruffy and down on his luck, Song Gi-hoon. He's played by Lee Jung-jae, and he lives with his mother. You find out he's working as a driver. He used to work at a factory and lost his job. You learn a little bit more about that throughout the series. Not too much, but a little bit. He's divorced. He has a daughter. His ex-wife remarried, and the new husband, I guess, had a son. And this blended family is extremely happy. You find out they are planning to move to the U.S. And so Gi-hoon's mother It's like, you can't lose your daughter. You've got to do something. At the same time, his mother also has very terrible health. Oh, by the way, just another warning because I forgot to give it. This is going to be very spoilery. So if you haven't seen it and you don't want to be spoiled, stop, go watch the series, come back and see, if you agree with me. If you don't mind being spoiled, or if you've already seen it, then continue listening. Gi-hoon's mother is played by Kim Young-ok. If you watch K-dramas at all, she plays a grandmother in a ton of them. She's actually playing the grandmother with dementia in All Kinds of Daughters-in-Law. She's been in a ton of them, like I can't even remember. Anyway, her character's name in this show is Oh Mal-soon. She has health issues, and because of Gi-hoon's money problems, he has a gambling addiction, and things haven't gone well since he lost his job at the factory. It's a bad situation. So it's Gi-hoon's daughter's birthday. Her name is Ga-young, and his mother's like, go and get her some chicken. That's her favorite food. He's like, okay. The mother gives him money. He ends up stealing his mother's money and going to the ATM to get out money, and it's like, oh man. So he's not the nicest guy. This isn't good. They're living kind of a rough life. You don't know so much about her health issues until a little bit later, but still, like, and so then he wants to take her out for her birthday. He ends up winning at the horse races and then gets pickpocketed. And you'll realize later that the pickpocket is one of the other contestants. Then some of his creditors see him and they beat him up in the bathroom. And so he's kind of desperate and doesn't know what to do. He takes out his daughter for dinner, does not take her for chicken. He takes her to eat something else. And then he had gotten her a birthday present from one of those claw machines. And it turned out to be a gun lighter, which is like almost the most inappropriate birthday gift ever. Could be worse. So she's kind of, she loves him, but she's kind of like, oh, Dad. So it's also interesting. I think it was on Reddit. I'm not entirely sure, but it was, where people were discussing the show back, not that long after it aired. And somebody characterized Gi-hoon as kind of a villain towards his own daughter. He's obviously not a good father. Yeah, he gives lip service to the idea that he wants to be a good father. But given the chance, he's not. And at the end, he also has another chance and totally does something that's going to disappoint her again, and doesn't even tell her, oh, hey, I'm not going to come after all, blah, blah, blah. He just goes away, and it's like, well, you could end up dead and she's never going to know what happened to you. Anyway, that's the setup. And it actually gets into the games a little bit faster than I remembered. So when he's in the subway, he runs into this man. He thinks this guy is an evangelist, but he's not. And this man is played by Gong Yoo. That was totally exciting for me. I did not expect it. So Gong Yoo starred in Train to Busan. He was in Coffee Prince, which is a drama. He has been in a lot of things, which I haven't seen yet. Oh, he was in Goblin, which is one of my favorite K-dramas. And he is also the star of Finding Mr. Destiny, which has been my favorite Korean romantic comedy for years now. So it was very exciting. So he plays a kid's game with him where they have two envelopes. You choose an envelope and then you try to throw it at the other envelope so it turns over. And if the envelope turns over, then Gi-hoon would win. If it doesn't, then he loses money to this man. And then Gi-hoon starts to lose. So the man makes this deal, I can slap you and then you can get some money taken off of your debt or whatever. So in the end, Gi-hoon has been slapped around a lot. So when he leaves, you can tell like his face is very red and kind of almost bruised. The man gives him a business card with some shapes on it and says to call that number if he wants to play more or something like that. So Gi-hoon leaves. He goes home, talks to his mother. His mother's very disappointed in him. And he ends up calling the number and goes to meet them and is basically kind of kidnapped. He's like taken away in a van, blindfolded. I think they even gas him. They gas all the people. They are gathering all the different contestants so that they won't know where they're going or see where they're going. And then they arrive there. They are dressed in different clothing with numbers on them. Gi-hoon ends up being contestant number 4, 5, 6. Along the way, you get to see some of the other people and get to know a few of the contestants. They are told that if they win, they can get all the money that's in this giant piggy bank that's hanging from the ceiling. And every time, well, what you learn along the way is every time a contestant is eliminated, the money that would have gone to them is dropped into this piggy bank. So, in theory, if there's only one winner at the end, you get all that money, and it's like an incredible amount. So, of course, they're all, very interested in it. What you learn along the way is these people are all down on their luck. They're not entirely sympathetic because there are reasons why they end up in there. You get to know a few of their stories, but most of them you don't get to know, but you can imagine there's probably an entire range of hard luck stories. Among the players, we see Cho Sang-woo, who is played by Park Hae-soo. You might know him from Prison Playbook, which is that series which I think I mentioned last episode. I'm still trying to make it all the way through. It's about a baseball player that ends up in prison for defending his sister. Sang-woo and Gi-hoon were schoolmates. They both come from the neighborhood of Sangmun-dong. And although both of their mothers were shop stall keepers, Sang-woo ended up going all the way to Seoul National University and studied business and got a nice job. And his mother is so proud of him. And she is completely unaware that he is wanted for embezzlement. And I don't think it's just embezzlement. I think there's other stuff that he's under investigation for. He has gotten a lot of loans and put up his mother's shop as collateral for one of the loans. And so he's in a lot of trouble and he has endangered his mother and she doesn't even know it. And so he's not happy to see Gi-hoon. Gi-hoon keeps trying to be friendly with him. And I think Sang-woo doesn't like the reminder. Later in the show, towards the end, Gi-hoon finally says, basically, you're being kind of elitist. I'm the idiot and the dumb one, but we both ended up in the same place. And how that happened. There's an interesting approach to classism and elitism throughout these episodes. So Cho Sang-woo is number 218. And then we have Ho Sung-tae portraying a gangster, Jang Dok-soo. And so Ho Sung-tae, if you've watched my Casey episodes, he is a cat lover. And this was really his breakout role. He has acted a lot and he was in some things that I had seen before, but I didn't really notice him until this show. And now I watch some of the older stuff and I'm like, oh, he'll pop up in there as some sort of gangster role. He studied Russian and worked in sales for TVs and he lived in Russia for a while. So I think he is sometimes able to incorporate that into his roles, although not as many of the roles as I would have thought. I think it's only maybe one role that I've seen where he's used Russian, and this is not one of them. I did find out he had to gain a lot of weight for this role, which I didn't even notice. I didn't even think anything of it. But he afterward lost it, and it did cause a lot of health issues. Also, particularly in his case, but possibly in some of the other actors' cases, the psychological toll of these roles was very difficult on them. So that's just something to note. I'll just break in and admit I started recording this episode in, I think, spring of 2023. Obviously, some of the stuff has changed. Like I say early on, that season 2 is supposed to be broadcast at the end of 23, maybe early 24 or something like that. No. So here we are at the end of 2024, and the second season is supposed to premiere on December 26th. So you can see how things have altered. I completed a second rewatch, so that would be the third time watching Squid Game all the way through. And I finished that today, which is December 15th, 2024. And it's very interesting to me because each time I've watched it, I've gotten something different out of the show. And I think it's very much related to my perspective of the time. When I was doing my first rewatch back in, I think, 2023, maybe late 2022, I had a more hopeful but very stressed outlook. But there were certain political things that were changed, and so things looked more hopeful, at least in that respect. Personal life wise, not so much at that point. And now, here at the end of 2024, personal life wise, things are much better, but political wise, not so much. For future listeners, November, a certain person was reelected in the United States, and his party is threatening all kinds of changes that are very, very scary for minorities, marginalized groups, immigrants, everybody. And a lot of people didn't realize that some of these changes would also affect them. So they helped vote him in. It's crazy. Anyway, so there's that. And also, for anybody who knows, we don't have universal health care in the United States. And it has long been a problem that's gotten worse and worse. I am very familiar with this as I try not to go to the doctor because I don't know what I will end up getting charged. It's not very pleasant to be harassed for payments. So that's something. Within the last week, I think it was, a CEO of a healthcare insurance company was assassinated, and it brought to the fore the absolute injustice in the healthcare system in the United States and how these healthcare companies basically work to not cover costs, even what anybody reasonable would say should be covered. They will find a way to not cover it, and you will get socked with all kinds of crazy bills. So, Gihun's mother's illness and how she had to leave the hospital because she's like, we don't have insurance. You got rid of it because you wanted the money to gamble. And she needed an operation and she wasn't going to get that operation. And then you see what ends up happening to her in the rest of the show, which we'll get to later. But it's just, it really hit home in a new way because of this healthcare discussion that's going on in the United States right now. Also in South Korea, their president very suddenly declared martial law. I think it's not entirely clear all of his reasons why, except that he was growing increasingly isolated politically and could not get laws that he wanted passed or budgets or something that he wanted passed through. So he was going to try to force things through, and it went very badly. There was an immediate reaction from the Korean people, immediate reaction from their assembly people, their parliament or their version of Congress gathered in. They were being blocked by the military. They were climbing over fences to get in there to be able to vote for impeachment or to end the martial law at that point. There was a former news anchor who had become one of the assembly people, and she actually grabbed a soldier's rifle and challenged him for what he was doing. And anyway, the martial law was ended very suddenly a few hours later, and the people have been protesting. It's been very interesting because Korean celebrities generally try not to speak about politics. It's not, they get just hounded if they try to say anything political, or they are punished by their companies if they do anything that's seen as political. But a lot of celebrities have come forward and supported the protesters. And one of the kind of cool things, but of course, I think it kind of irritates the Koreans that this is what's picked up about the protests. But the people at the protests were bringing their light sticks from their different groups, and they were kind of taking part. And I think there was like even a visual display to teach you which light stick belonged to which group or singer. And so that was kind of a fun element. Anyway, so you can see where the South Korean people are holding very strong onto their democracy. On Saturday, I believe it was, the assembly did vote to impeach the president. The crisis is not entirely over. I think they still have to do some things, but I think it's a good example. I think the South Korean people are very good examples to the rest of us of what we need to do. We need to have immediate reaction, strong reaction, and hold on to try to achieve the democracy and the equality that we deserve. And so Squid Game isn't so much about politics in that way, it's more about society. Not particularly politics or anything like that, but they do talk about equality. So there is something that happens later in the show, and people were kind of cheating in the game and also doing something to make a profit, and they were swiftly punished and hung up as an example to the participants in the game to warn them not to try that again, that nobody else should try anything funny because they are trying to achieve a sort of equality, which was kind of a joke because at the same time, you gradually find out that this game is run by very rich people from around the world who just see these desperate poor people as playthings, horses, so to speak. I think it's this one character, the front man, tells Gi-hoon, well, you like horse racing, so you were like the horses to us. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead. So to get back in order. So it was very interesting. This third viewing really made me think, I'm getting something different out of this K-drama every time. I've heard people say that they'll watch something every year, that they just love it for one reason or another. And I wonder if Squid Game is something where I could watch it every year and just get something different. I think definitely my personal perspective at the moment affects the show and affects how I perceive it. So anyway, back to the show. I think the last character I talked about was Doksu, the gangster. His number is 101. He had betrayed his gangster boss in episode 2, and people from the Philippines came to get him. I think he had stolen money from a casino down there, something like that. And oh, yes, he owes a casino down in the Philippines, I guess. Okay, so then Jung Ho-yeon, or sometimes just known as Ho-yeon, who is a model, and this was her first acting role. She played Kang Se-byuk, who was a North Korean. Her number is 67. She was the pickpocket who robbed Gi-hoon in the first episode. She's very closed emotionally. You can tell she's very unhappy. She had somehow run afoul of Doksu out in the wide world. And so he was going after her, and then Gi-hoon was like, wait, she needs to give me my money back. And Doksu's like, this isn't your problem. And so anyway, so she seems like a bad person initially, just from initial impressions, but she's actually not. She is trying to get her mother. No. Is it her mother? Yes, because her father had been shot crossing the river to get away from North Korea. And so she is trying to get her mother out of North Korea. She and her little brother are in South Korea. Her brother is living in an orphanage, and his name is Chol. So Kang Chol. She is very sad because she paid a lot of money to get her mother out, and then something happened, so she has to start all over. So basically, the broker who she's dealing with is ripping her off, but she was also ripped off by whoever took the money, but he's not working with her. He's kind of dirty. Then there is player 199, Ali Abdul, played by Anupam Tripathi. Anupam Tripathi, I saw him in some K-drama or movie in a very tiny role recently, but it was an older thing. I think it was even filmed before Squid Game, but I'm not entirely sure. And he was recently in a Netflix movie about a hijacking in India. It was a true story. IC-814. I haven't watched it yet, but I might watch it semi soon. Anyway, so he was very proud of that work, and this, again, Squid Game was his breakout role. I believe he is helping promote the new season. So this character of Ali Abdul, he's very sweet, very nice. He is married with a child, and he works at a shady factory where the boss is trying not to pay him. And so he goes in and tries to get his back pay, and he causes an accident where his boss ends up losing his hand. So he is wanted for injuring the boss. And he tells his wife to take their kid and go back home to be safe. Anyway, he's very heartfelt and sweet. There is also this woman who is very, very annoying, and she's very memorable. And it's so funny because the actress, I had seen her in a tons of things, but I didn't know her name or anything. But this character, everybody knows the character, even if they don't know the character's name, because that character is so annoying and perfect portrayal of this character. So she is number 212, Han Minyo, and she is played by Kim Joo-ryung. And she claims at first that she wants to get out. Oh, well, okay, so they have the first game, which I'll tell you about in a moment. And then afterwards, she kind of throws a fit and claims that she has to get home to her baby. But then they ask her questions and she can't even name the baby. So she's obviously lying. She's very sneaky, very much trying anything she can to get on the winning side. And most of the time, it doesn't work out for her. Well, we'll get to some of her exploits later. But anyway, Kim Joo-young, excellent actress, and Han Yo is her character's name. Okay, so the first game, they are all taken out into the courtyard. They're a sort of a courtyard. Remember, there's 456 players. There's this giant doll, which, if you know anything about Squid Game, you're probably familiar with it because that's one of the iconic photos that they have. And she will turn her face around and call out this refrain. And then when she turns around, you have to stop. If you don't stop, you're out. But in this game, in Squid Game, you get shot if you move when she turns around. Her eyes zing around and then she shoots you. On this third watch, I noticed that Gi-hoon sometimes has minimal movements after she turns around, and he doesn't get shot, but some of these other people get shot for very, very minimal movements. I'm like, it's a little bit unfair. So I kind of wonder if there was some sort of thing that they programmed in to allow Gi-hoon to get all the way through for some reason, at least for that round. If there was some sort of improper balance among the players in a way. I don't know. I don't have any basis for that, but I just wonder. From my understanding, from everything I've heard, people are very much excited about season 2, and some of the actors, of course, this could just be them kind of puffing up the show, but they say it's even better than season 1. So we'll see. Maybe there's something in there. You can see definitely there's a part later after this first round where they go out into the world, and then you can see sometimes how people from the game come and try to manipulate them back into the game. And in not all cases, but you could see. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some manipulation among who they wanted to continue among the participants just to see what would happen. So anyway, in that first round, they lose over half of the people. They only have 201 people left. And then they ended up voting to leave the game, to give it up, not win anything, go into the public. And the game people said you can, within a certain amount of time, come back. And when they did end up coming back, they were all sort of, as I said, manipulated in. 187 came back. So it was a little bit less, but still. So, for instance, when Gi-hoon went out, he ended up running into this elderly man who was player number 1, Oh Ilam. And this elderly man had dementia. He has a brain tumor and he seems very nice. And he just happens to run into Gi-hoon. And later you can see why I'll say that wasn't just a coincidence, that was actually manipulation. This character, player number 1, was portrayed by Oh Young-soo. I believe he even won an award, at least one award for his performance. it should be said there was a scandal. He was accused of acting inappropriately. And so he has effectively ended his career. But this is, I think, the only role I've ever seen him in, and he was very effective in that role. So I just thought I should mention that. And throughout the game, he kind of gives hints. He very much enjoys that these games are very reminiscent of the games he would play as a child. But he does have episodes where he's very disoriented. He can't even remember his own name at times, that sort of thing. Oh, the first game is called Red Light, Green Light. It is very common in Korean dramas, so I guess it's regularly played still. Of course, obviously, they don't really shoot the participants, but that was the first one. The second game, so when they come back from the outside world, the annoying woman, Minyo, insists on going to the bathroom at night. And Sebyok, the North Korean woman, insists on going with her to the bathroom. And so Minyo is just going in there. She had snuck in a lighter and cigarettes by hiding them in a personal place. And then Sebyok wanted to go up into the tunnels, the air ducts or whatever, and see what she could find out by doing that. And so she sees some people who are masked. All of the staff are hidden behind these colorful outfits and masks with the shapes on them. And she sees them stirring something in big pots, and she doesn't know exactly what's going on. When they go back, and then they end up getting called for the second game, they aren't able to really figure out what's going to happen. But Sangu figured out, I think something was said by Sebyok to him. So he kind of ended up figuring out what the game was ahead of time, but he didn't give a hint to Gihun or anybody else. The second game was Dalgona. It's you make these sugary snacks and you imprint a shape into it. And the child or player has to get the outside off without breaking the actual design. You lose. And you can actually eat these sugar confections. And so Gihun ended up choosing the umbrella shaped one, which was the most difficult. But he was able to figure out by the end of the round that if he licked it, it would make it soft enough to break off the outside. And so he was just able to complete it before the time period ended. Now, this in the second watch, it really bugged me because they were in this room where they had a huge slide, colorful, and there was one participant up at the top of the slide. And there was, of course, one of the staff members there guarding them. And it just was completely obvious this person was going to end up dying and sliding down the slide. There was no other reason to be in that position. So that kind of annoyed me that second time. But the third time, it didn't stick out as much to me for some reason. I think the gruesomeness of episode one had really kind of tempered what happens in the second game. And so that was kind of funny that something has a completely different reaction at different times to me. So that was the second game. In the fourth episode, we find out that there's a doctor among the players, and he is taken out at night to harvest organs, and some of the staff members take them. Now, when somebody dies, they're taken in a coffin and they're usually just cremated. But this doctor and some of the staff members are harvesting these organs and then shipping them out every night to make extra money. And they help this doctor out to make sure that he doesn't end up losing any of the rounds. They tell him ahead of time what the next game will be. So he ends up kind of joining Doksu, the gangsters team, and giving them hints about the game. But as I mentioned before, later the doctor and those staff members get caught. And so Doksu, I think, is very rattled when he sees their bodies hanging and hears the warning that nobody is to take away the sense of equality within the game. Let's see. So the third game is a tug of war game. And they didn't know yet what they were supposed to do, but they knew that they needed 10 people on their team. So Gihun and Sangu, and they had the elderly man, and then they had Sebyok, and so they also had Ali, and they were supposed to go out and each find another person to bring onto the team. And they weren't supposed to get women because they already had one woman and they had an elderly man, and this was, kind of a handicap for the team. So they wanted men. And instead, Sabyok brought back a teenage girl. I think all the other people were men. They brought back a pastor, and the teenage girl kind of poked at the pastor for his faith. So anyway, they are going to perform, and Doksu was the one who had the warning ahead of time. And apparently, this tug of war filming was very difficult on all of the actors. In the shooting, it would be one team and it would look like they were tugging against another team, but they were actually tugging against a machine. And I guess it was very strenuous. So you would pull them until they were far enough that the opposite team falls off the ledge, and then the rope in the middle would get cut so the other team wouldn't fall in. And so that way it cut down the participants by about half. It was interesting because the old man, Ilam, player number one, gave them this long speech, which it's like, okay, that elevator ride was not long enough to give this whole speech because they kind of have the voiceover as they're getting ready to perform. So, he didn't say all of that. And he gives them this hint, well, several hints actually, to be able to win against just about any other team. Now, it does become kind of close, but Sangu comes with an idea that ends up saving them. Like, it's a crazy idea about taking 3 steps forward, and it takes Gihun, I think Gihun was the front person, right up to the edge, but luckily it worked. The other team lost their balance and ended up falling, and so their team won. There is also, when Gihun went out into the world, he went to the police station back in episode 2 and tried to report this game. They just thought he was a crazy man, possibly homeless, and didn't pay any attention. But one of the policemen who came in kind of after he reported it heard what they were saying, and he was like, oh. And so he kind of follows Gihun around, and he ends up sneaking into the game. Yeah, it was kind of interesting because he had to like sneak onto a ferry and all kinds of stuff. When that whole thing with the doctor and the staff members kind of went south, because the doctor was very upset. He was very tired and very cranky, and they didn't have the information on the next game for him yet. And so he ended up killing a staff member. So everything goes haywire. And that's how the higher staff members found out about this whole thing that they had going on. This policeman who had snuck in sneaks into the apartment of this person who is dressed, I think, all in black, and he has a black mask. He sometimes uses a thing to alter his voice a little bit, and he is called the front man. So the policeman is played by Wee Ha Jun, and his character's name is Hwang Junho. You may know him as the little brother in Something in the Rain. And he was also the bad guy in this movie called Midnight, which I really liked. The main character, this woman, is supposed to be deaf, and she is stalked by this killer. And a lot of people didn't like how that was. I think it was actually very good. It was a thriller that was actually thrilling. But anyway, so that was it. So we had June. And so he sneaks in and all this stuff because he is looking for his brother. And his brother had disappeared within the last few months. So remember, this is taking place in 2021. And he finds one of those Squid Game cards in his brother's room in a rooming house. And so that when he found out that Gihun was reporting the same thing, he follows Gihun and then sneaks in. So he sneaks into this front man's apartment. Now, there was no way for him to know that they would actually be storing all this stuff, but there are tons of rooms in this apartment, and there's a storage room with all the records of the past games and the current game. So he starts looking through the current records and doesn't find his brother's name. His brother is named Hwang In-ho. So he looks through past winners and finds out that his brother won in 2015. And we don't get any more explanation from that. I mean, as you can tell from the current game, there ends up being one winner, I think, usually. So, what happened between 2015 and 2021 that this man is still somehow involved in it? What is his role? And you kind of find out. Junho hides as a staff member for much of the show, and he tries to just kind of figure things out without having explicit directions and makes some stumbling, but he, continues. He discovers that somebody who has a room near him is coughing in Morse code. I thought that was kind of funny. So I think that might have been one of the people that was involved in the organ harvesting. Anyway, so he snuck up into the apartment, found that info, and he is up there when the front man comes back. And the front man is played by Lee Byung-hun, a very famous actor. He was in Iris, which was a K-drama I watched. And yeah, he's in a lot of movies. So the front man figures out, it was kind of funny because, okay, so they have this phone, an older style phone. It's not rotary style, it's got buttons, but it is like one of those rotary phones with the receiver with the coiled cord leading up to it. And the way the front man puts it down, the cord goes around. Like, in my opinion, he puts it down the wrong way. And when Junho tests the phone, he puts it down with the receiver heading the other way, so it doesn't go all the way around the phone. And the front man immediately picks that up and realizes that somebody's in the apartment. He has staff members searching for this outsider because they know there's an intruder, but he doesn't find him. Like, Junho ends up getting away at that point. So it's just an interesting little thing. We'll get to more about the front man later. Episode 6 is probably the most difficult episode to watch. Episodes 1 and 4 were extremely gruesome. I didn't remember how gruesome episode 4 was. In episode 4, they had, I think that's when they gave them less foods, they all got cranky, and then they end up fighting at night. Doksu and his gang decide to take out as many people as they can. I think they killed 27 people. I'm not entirely sure. It's just horrible. I mean, you don't really get rest and you're hungry. Just terrible. And then that was also the episode with the tug of war, I believe. So episode 6 is the one that is always really upsetting. The first couple times I cried, I didn't really cry this time, but it was really it was really hard. So it's called Ganbu. The elderly man, player number 1, talks to Gi-hoon, and Gi-hoon has stood up for him in multiple ways. And he ends up telling him, we're Ganbu, we're friends, where we share everything. And it's such a nice thing. And, Gi-hoon really wants to help out the old man and protect him. So in this episode, you have teams of 2. And so everybody was picking like the person that they most trusted or most loved or whatever. There was a married couple, they were a team. And then Gi-hoon was with the older man. And let's see, Sang-woo was with Ali. And they seem to really be making a friendship. And Sang-woo really likes him, I think. And Ali really likes Sang-woo and looks up to him. Se-byuk, the Korean woman, is with the teenage girl, and so on. And each of them are given a bag with 10 marbles. And then it turns out that within this time limit, you have to play a game. It can be any sort of game that you devise. But each team has to have one player that ends up with 20 marbles, and that team player wins. And of course, the other team player would die. So this is, of course, devastating. Sang-woo, even though he feels very badly, he ends up betraying Ali, and it's really heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And at the same time, Gi-hun ends up tricking the elderly man who seems to be having a kind of a bad episode with his dementia. And then it seems at the end that the old man actually realized the entire time that Gi-hun was fooling him, and Gi-hun felt even worse. Se-byuk and the girl, they tell each other about their lives. So of course we know Se-byuk is, wants to be again with her brother. She's trying to get her mother out of North Korea. The teenage girl tells her this horrible story. She had just come out of jail. Her father had killed her mother, and she had killed her father. And it turned out that her father beat her mother and abused the girl. She doesn't go into detail, but I think it was physical and sexual just because of the way it's phrased. And the father was a pastor, so that might explain why she kind of had it out for the religious character from earlier on. This teenage girl purposely lost, and because she knew that Se-byuk had something to live for. And it was really heartbreaking. This character was really great. Like, you think she's just this annoying teenager, but that she made this sacrifice for somebody else. So the teenager was called Ji-young, and she claimed that she didn't have a surname. And she was played by Iyumi. And I think she was in All of Us Are Dead. Yes, she was in All of Us Are Dead, which was a very good zombie series. I'll talk about that at some point. And that performance was wonderful in Squid Game. So all of these people, like, it was very hard to get through this episode, and to have these really, like, basically the good character ends up dying. And it's not that all of them are bad, but then in episode 7, we get to the really bad acting. It was called VIPs, and you get to see these VIPs who are from around the world. Most of them are English speaking. There's one who is clearly Chinese, but not necessarily from China. He could be from Singapore or Malaysia or some other country where they have a lot of Chinese speakers. And they wear these masks, usually animalistic, but some of them weren't really animal masks. And they are just horrible people. And it was interesting because there's a lot of criticism over the bad acting, but I think in my third viewing, I kind of took that as like an extra layer of the characters, because there is this sense of these people are living in a completely different world. They don't see these staff members or the players as actual people. One of these VIPs basically is going to rape Junho for fun and doesn't see anything wrong with it. And then Junho takes him out. He doesn't kill him, but he takes him out. And so that's when they know that the outsider infiltrated the VIP circle somehow. And so they go out into a manhunt for him outside. And Junho tries to escape the island, and he also tries to send some of the evidence that he has videotaped or photographed to his fellow policemen. And you don't know if it goes through, and he's confronted by the front man, and the front man says there's very bad reception, so probably didn't get sent. So you don't know. And it's kind of clear at the end of this episode. I think it's episode 7 that this happens in. No, episode 8. So 7 and 8. The front man is revealed to be Hwang In-ho, Junho's brother that he's been looking for. And it's very interesting because there's a huge age difference, which I guess would kind of make sense about In-ho having played in the 2015 games. But still, we don't know anything about how In-ho ended up staying with the game, becoming the front man, that sort of thing. So hopefully we'll get more information in season 2. And the last thing you see of Junho is that he is shot and I think falls into the water. So we don't know what happens to him. As with some other elements in the show, if you don't actually see them die, you can't be sure they're dead. So there you go. They start, oh, actually, I guess it would be the whole game was in episode. Okay, so in the VIP episode, episode 7, they did the 5th game. There are going to be 6 games altogether. The 5th game is this glass stepping stones game. I think this is probably not actually a Korean children's game. So this was just a kind of a puzzle for people to figure out. So there is this bridge made of glass stepping stones. Each set has one set of regular glass and one set of tempered glass, one panel of each. And you don't know which is which. And there are, I think it was 16 participants left. So, of course, people die very early on because they don't have any way to tell. They just have to guess. And there's lots of annoyance because people are trying to delay because they don't know what to do. Doksu tries to bully people into walking in front of him so that they would die rather than him. And Minyo, the annoying woman, grabs him. And it's kind of interesting because like she does this thing where she grabs him and then they fall onto the next thing. She's like, if I, basically, if she dies, she's taking him with her. And so they fall onto the next panel and it shatters. And so, of course, they both fall to their death. But what if it hadn't? What if it had been the tempered glass? That was the good thing. Like, what would have happened then? Because they wouldn't have been in a good position to get back up. Well, anyway, I guess anything for the story's sake. And I would not have been able to do this game. Whew. Just the height alone, stepping on top of see-through glass. Ooh, terrible. So at the end of that game, there are only 3 participants left. Gihun, Sangwoo, and Sebyuk. And at the end, when they all reach the other side, the bridge shatters. And we find out after a little while, Sebyuk has this huge chunk of glass that lands kind of near her ribs. And so she has this wound. She's not getting it treated. She like tries to kind of cover it up as she can. And then the 3 of them are given special formal wear and presented with a dinner of steak. And Sebyuk doesn't eat most of her food because, of course, she's not feeling very well. And Gihun notices this. They also all notice that at the end of the dinner, when their plates are cleared, they are left with their knives, which are very sharp because it's meant to cut steak. So they go back into the chamber where they sleep. Gradually throughout the game, the bunk beds from players who have died are all removed. So you see more and more of the walls. I think it's around episode 7 where you can really notice that on the walls are drawings of the games that are performed throughout the series. I think it comes so late that it doesn't really help them in performing the games. So there's only the 3 of them. Gihun says to Sebyuk, we can actually cancel this game because we would be the majority. And she's like, no. I think she talks about the money because, of course, she has to take care of her brother and try to get her mother. And so she kind of tries to get him to promise that they'll, take care of each other's loved ones. And then he tries to get her help. And while he's trying to get her help, Sangwoo goes and kills her. And so he's very upset. So it's just Sangwoo and Gihun. And they come to the last game, which is the Squid Game. So it's this pattern on the ground that's supposed to represent a squid. The rules are very, I don't know, it's a very violent game. I guess in real life it can be violent too. So it's the fight to the death. They're basically told you fight to the death. It's, I don't know. Gihun's very frantic. And I don't think, maybe towards the beginning it looked like Sangwoo might win. But I think it becomes apparent pretty early on that it's actually Gi-hoon winning. And he chooses not to directly kill Sangwoo. The staff members end up killing him instead. And this takes place in the courtyard where the red light, green light game took place in the first episode. Gi-hoon wins. He actually tried at the very last minute to just exit the game, and they wouldn't let him do it. The staff wouldn't let him do that. And afterwards, he's taken out, blindfolded, and he has that discussion with the front man in the limo about being horses. and he's dropped off at a crosswalk, and he has this credit card that was stuffed in his mouth, or bank card, I guess, and it has all the cash from the contest on it. He only takes out 10,000 won, and a year passes and you find out he didn't touch it other than that 10,000. He was just living as he was. So anyway, right after the game, when he gets freed from his bindings and somebody helps him, he goes home and he discovers that his mother has died in the meantime. He wasn't there. She was very ill, and it's very sad. Actually, on this rewatch, the screen was so dark you could almost not see. I think it was somehow easier to see a couple years ago on the TV. So his mother died, and he continues living. I don't know. He becomes really scraggly. One of the reasons for this episode, and it's kind of funny because this is Lee Jung Jae's birthday, December 15th. And so December 15th of 2021, it just happened to be like I happened to look at his Wikipedia page and I was like, oh, it's his birthday. And I was discussing Squid Game with my coworker Margaret, and she didn't like the show at all. She only watched the first episode. They watched it dubbed, her and her husband, and I don't agree with dubbing for the most part. And I attempted to listen to part of it with dubbing the second time I did the rewatch. Or no, the second time I did a watch. So it was the second watch, my first rewatch. And I lasted maybe 30 seconds. It was the bathroom scene where Gi-hoon was getting beat up. And I was just like, these voices are awful. It doesn't fit. It ruins the whole thing. So Margaret felt that Lee Jung Jae was overacting. And I don't know. I mean, I think I'm kind of used to Korean acting in all these different things, and I've also seen Lee Jung Jae in all kinds of different roles. The character of Gi-hoon is different for the most part from his other characters that I've seen. But then in the last episode and a half, he becomes like the Lee Jung Jae that you see in New Worlds, or possibly Deliver Us from Evil, but mainly New Worlds. So I don't know. I felt like I don't believe that much in acting awards and awards in general, but I do think that he did an excellent job. I don't think he was really overacting. I think there's this element of his his character is acting. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but I think that kind of explains how I feel about it. And you can see his emotions and that sort of thing. She only watched the first episode. She didn't watch beyond that. So, yeah. And I made her promise to watch his movie Hunt, and she has still not done that. Margaret, for shame. It's on Hulu. You can watch it anytime you want. And I'm sure your husband would like to see that. I think it would be a fun movie for the both of you. Anyway, she did watch Over the Rainbow, which I lent to her, and she admitted that she liked Lee Jung Jae in that movie. So, okay, so when I started recording this episode, I had plans to talk about Finding Mr. Destiny and Over the Rainbow, but we're going to skip Finding Mr. Destiny because I talked about it in the last episode, which was the Gong Yu episode. And so we're going to just talk about Over the Rainbow. This episode is kind of long already, so actually, I might push off Over the Rainbow into a separate episode about something else. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about Squid Game. I felt that it approached a bunch of societal issues. At the very end, when Gi-hoon has spent a year, he's barely spent any of the money, he is summoned to meet with his ganbu. And of course, I'm sure he realized at that moment, hey, the old man didn't die back in that marble game. So he goes and meets the guy, and he's on his deathbed, and his tumor has gotten worse. And he sees Ilam sees somebody on the ground. It's December 24th, I think, when they're having this take place. And he's like, that guy's going to freeze to death. Nobody's going to help him. If nobody helps him by midnight, I win. And if somebody helps him by midnight, then you win. And I can't even remember, even though I've seen the show 3 times, what exactly you win means. But I think it was just kind of a statement on humanity. Is there hope or is there not hope? And so somebody comes along and kind of checks the coat of this person on the ground and then walks away. And so it looks like nobody's going to really help him. You think that maybe he was just robbed. And so the minutes are ticking on. They're talking about this whole thing. Gi-hun finds out Ilham was actually the creator of the game. He had become so rich that he was bored and he didn't like just watching the game. He felt it would be more exciting to actually take part in the game. And so he became player number one. Of course, there were directions not to kill him, as we now know. And it was kind of interesting because you can kind of look back at all this stuff. You realize he was having fun during all these rounds. He was not really scared. Like he would act scared at certain moments, but it was kind of to manipulate. So I don't think the dementia was ever really real. So the minutes are ticking on. They're having this discussion. And right before it strikes midnight, a police car comes right to this man on the ground. The door opens up, and that person who had like kind of fiddled with his coat before comes out along with police, and they take care of this person that was left on the ground. So there we have that there is hope. That it looks like there won't be hope, but there is hope. And yeah, so that's sort of no, it's not really where it ends. So there's several points in the last episode where it could really end, but it keeps having more stuff. So after the old man is dead and Gihun walks away, the front man is there and he closes the old man's eyes. Then I don't know if another year passes. I think so. Maybe not. It's a little bit unclear because Gihun is approached by his financial people and they're like, you haven't touched your money. And then all of a sudden, I think after he meets with the old man, he ends up taking some of the money. He gives it to Sangu's mother to help take care of her. But it's like, okay, it's been kind of long. Wouldn't they have repossessed her stall by then? I don't know. He also goes and I think adopts Sebyok's sister and then not sister, Sebyok's brother and leaves him with Sangu's mother. And Gihun is going to go off to America to visit his daughter, Gayong. Except when he's in the airport, like subway area, he sees the slapping guy. And so he rushes to go meet him, and the guy, like, gets onto a train so that Gihun can't actually encounter him. And Gihun goes and steals the Squid Game card from the man that the slapping guy had been playing with. He ends up calling the number and he says he's going to enter the game. So he's on his way to fly to America to see his daughter for, I think, the first time in 2 years. He even calls her and he's like, oh, I'll be there. He's like going along I don't know, those things between the gate and the plane. I don't know what they're called. And he's like on his way, and then he ends up calling that number, re enters the game. The front man comes on the phone and is like, you should get on that plane. So that's interesting because they're still watching him, although maybe the slapping guy reported that he had seen him. And Gihun is like, I'm coming and I'm gonna take you down, basically. So that was the end of that show. There was a lot to think about. I know the way I describe things is a little bit scattered, but it really is like peeling an onion or just how, I guess, like fine wine, like it changes over time. And so I think, when I watched it the second time, I was like, maybe it's a little bit overrated. Maybe it's not as great as it seemed the first time I watched it. But now the third time, I'm like, no, I think more than ever, it is very relevant. And I'm interested to see what'll happen with season two. I'm trying not to get too excited because I don't want to be let down. But, we'll see. And, particularly how the world has changed and how it's portrayed in the show. So Thank you for listening. Thank you for putting up with this long thing that took almost 2 years to record. And, if you have any comments or questions, you can email me at erikatalksdramas@gmail.com. That's erikatalksdramas@gmail.com. You can also check out my YouTube channel, Erika Talks Dramas, all one word. And I've got an Instagram account, Erika Talks Dramas, where I sometimes post promos or little hints or whatever. And I do post the Casey episodes also on there as well as YouTube. So thank you for sticking with me. I hope we see you next time. And somehow we'll work over the rainbow into something. All right. Have a good night.
Erika talks K-dramas, C-dramas, T-dramas, HK-dramas. Erika talks K-dramas, J-dramas, Turkish dramas, Thai dramas, but mostly K-dramas. Erika talks Egyptian dramas, Indian dramas, telenovelas, but mostly K-dramas. Do do do.